We believe that every American community must jealously guard the freedom to publish and to circulate in order to preserve its own freedom to read. We believe that publishers and librarians have a profound responsibility to give validity to that freedom to read by making it possible for the readers to choose freely from a variety of offerings. The freedom to read is guaranteed by the Constitution. Those with faith in free people will stand firm on these constitutional guarantees of essential rights and will exercise the responsibilities that accompany these rights. Sounds like something that you would hear today, right? This was actually published by the American Library Association on June 25th, 1953. But today we're facing unprecedented challenges to the freedom to read across the country in public and school libraries everywhere. And in the middle of that fray comes a beautiful new picture book by Beth Ferry. And so today on the Adventures in Learning podcast, we're going to be talking about Roar for Reading, as well as many other topics. So Beth, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks for having me.
So you just heard me read from the 1953 ALA statement. Roar for Reading just popped into the middle of all this. Where did it come from?
Right. So, and you know what's funny? I had never read that statement, and it really makes you wonder in 1953 what was happening, because for them to write that, or if they were just being like proactive, like, prescient. How do you say that word? Prescient?
Yeah, prescient. I think it was the McCarthy era would be my guess. It's sort of post World War II. We were booming and we were entering the Cold War. That would be my guess as to where this is coming from. But yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's, I don't know. It really does. Like, cause you're like, we live in America. Like you feel this way, like America, land of the free, and books are whatever, a big, huge part of everyone's life. Even if they don't like to read, they're reading. So Roar for Reading, was really inspired by like this little guy. Like I got, I was sent a sketch of a lion, of the little lion and his dad, and they had books. And the idea was to write like kind of a love letter to libraries and how lions are, for me, when I saw that, I'm like, oh, of course, lions, because like that's how we think of when we think of a lion, outside the New York Public Library. They kind of feel like they're protecting it, even though, do they need protecting? Because you kind of, but yeah, right. Then you're like, but yeah, maybe they do. So I wasn't really planning on writing a book about book banning. But as I was writing it, I think it must be in my subconscious. I know it's happening. I'm reading about it in the Times, but I'm not really worrying about it in where I live because it's not happening really anywhere close to me. But then, when you really just think about like, wait a minute, like who is anyone to tell anyone that they can't read a book? And believe me, I'm all for parents,
of course,
being involved, but it really, I mean, to take it out of the library. And when you think about libraries, you know, free books, it's just, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Benjamin Franklin, right, that invented the first library. When you really think about the brilliance of that, like not everyone can afford a book or all the books that you might want to read. Right. And you can just go and borrow the book and read. Like, honestly, it's like a Christmas present always. So I think as I started writing it, I was like, it's just not okay. And I believe that everyone has a say for what their own children read, but that's not what's happening. And it's a scary thing to think that, there's so much bad out there. When you think about social media, you think about gun control, all the things, and don't you want to be like, maybe that's where our focus should be, not on banning books. I don't know. So yeah, I haven't really shared this with a class. I haven't, had the opportunity yet to read it to kids in a class or have a discussion, but I'm excited to, because I'm really interested to see what kids think about the whole, idea of banning books.
Well, and I know that from a library point of view, there are so many people I've talked to, authors, scientists, people who are teachers, people who are athletes, wide range of people who they got their start and their love for books at their public library. maybe money wasn't plentiful growing up, but there was this haven, this safe place where you could find something. And, one of the things we talk about is not everything in the library is for everybody. But, just because I don't happen to like books about basketball doesn't mean that all the books about basketball should come out of the library.
I think, right. And I think that is the best part, right? Is that, you first of all, you can't know everything. You can't.
Right.
It's not possible. Like, and when you walk into the library and there's so many books and you think like, wow, like what a testament to our culture that there are so many people writing so many books. And, I always say like, why do I write the books that I write? I don't know, like something inspires me, something piques my interest. And that happens to all these other different people. Their experience, sparks an idea. And it just is, it's like, not only do you get a peek into the world, and, the windows and mirrors, analogy
Yeah,
is so beautiful
it
because
really
truly,
is.
like, I mean, I think of half the, like, especially when you're a kid and you're like, wow, oh, like, oh, that's like, oh, I didn't even know that could be or happen. And I just think that the books that they're trying to ban, might not be the book that I need, but it's pretty much a book somebody needs.
Exactly. And it wouldn't have been written if there wasn't a need, because it spoke to that author and there is somebody out there who needs to receive it.
When they say like reading reminds you that you're not alone in the world. And I think that that's the most true statement, because I think when you're a child or even a teenager, you really sometimes think you're the only person going through something, because most of the time it's not something great. So you're not sharing it freely with your friends, you're not admitting to it. And so where are you going to get that affirmation that you need? If you can't speak about it, you can get
Yeah.
it from a book. And that's why, I don't know, just it does. I feel like what we're doing is the wrong thing, or what the people, and I'm so proud when I hear about these librarians, like the librarians that are truly, their lives are being ruined, which is another, but
Yes.
standing up for books because, somebody has to.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about Roar for Reading, because you and Andrew have done an amazing job in taking this giant issue and
Yeah.
bringing it down where it's not only understandable for younger readers, but you're offering a blueprint so that it's not just this is terrible, but you can roar. There's literally something you can do. And
Right.
so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about the book itself and maybe about what it means to roar.
Yeah, so I think it's set in a library, and so the main character Julius is the son of the librarian, and she gets a letter, and it's a small town idea, where the letter comes in the mail, and it's a list of books that the mayor's asking her to take off the shelf, and so she's of course upset, and she takes Julius with um her to go to the and to the meet the mayor, and the mayor is this like little frog, and I love this little frog so much because
I
it's just,
agree.
I just don't know how Andrew came up with like, oh, let's have a frog with like a mustache as the mayor, but it feels right. It feels like somebody small-minded, like maybe a frog would be. And she tries to explain her point of view, and he explains, he doesn't explain, but he, basically says you have to do it. And since the library, so she takes the books off the shelf. And I think so much of life is, you don't really know till it happens to you, which is sad, but true. And so Julius, like, starts to worry, are they going to take away my favorite books? Like, who gets to say? And so he gets upset and he roars. And the whole, history of the libraries is that lions did protect the libraries, but then they didn't need to anymore because we live in a free country. So they forgot they could roar. So once he roars, his mother can see, like, I can't just do it. I have to fight it. And so they fight and they rally and they call other book lovers and they march and they protest. And, it's funny because like there is a little acronym at the end of the book that is like, what you can do. It's like with the roar, it's recognized that there's been a book ban, organize together, act and respect. I think the respect part is my most favorite one because, you don't have to like the book. it still can exist, like even if 500 people, 1,000 people don't like the book, that doesn't mean it can't exist. So it just kind of tells kids that they, can speak to their adults and they can say like, this isn't okay. And hopefully, this is a picture book, so it's for the youngest readers,
Right.
but hopefully, they'll at least understand that they do have, a say.
And I was thinking it might be affirming for the parent or the librarian or the teacher reading the book to the child as well. Just a reminder that you have agency and that you can help do something.
Right, especially, and I think there are, especially think about not every kid loves to read, but when you're young and you're reading picture books and you're reading early chapter books, most of them are, they're happier books, they're like
Yeah.
happy endings and good things. So I think that children feel strongly about their books and, probably unless it's happening in their town, they don't even know that this can happen. And so I think it's also good to understand the broader picture of the world and that it's not, there are things happening out there that can affect them and they might not even know about it.
Well, and one of the things that I know is I've been thinking about freedom to read, and I've been working with librarians. A big issue is not the actual challenge itself, but the chilling effect that happens when fear creeps in and you start thinking, I'm not going to get that book because somebody might challenge it. So then it's like compounded because
Ah.
now there's never a chance for that book to find its audience or that person who might need it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and I think when you see what's the one, I just read an article yesterday in the Times about this specific librarian who was receiving, you know, death threats over her standing up for not pulling books off the shelves. And you really do. You think, how does anybody think that that's the answer?
Exactly.
You
And
know,
it's a very small group of people. And I think that's the other piece to comfort and assure
yeah,
kids about is that truly the bulk of the challenges in the country are coming from a very small group of people who do
right.
not speak for the rest of the country.
Right. And yet, this is the other problem though, right? They're getting a lot of attention. And I think sometimes when, we do focus on the negative in the media and things, then it seems like it is a bigger problem, that it is lots of people. When you really start reading, you're like, oh, it's like 10 parents, went to the school board, 10.
Right.
And everybody else isn't there because you know what? They're home and it's easy to get busy in your life and not realize, oh, I got to do something. I have to be aware of what's happening.
And so hopefully Roar for Reading will inspire folks to be aware
Yeah,
of what's happening and to keep an eye on it because you want your children to have the opportunity to find the book that connects
right.
to them.
That they need. Exactly. I totally agree. Yeah. Or that even if just makes them become a reader, not
Yes,
even, they might not even need a book to like, with anything they're struggling with, but they just need a book to love so that they read more books.
exactly. And that's what we want ultimately is a nation of readers.
I know we would be much better off, right?
Exactly. So Roar for Reading was not the only book you had come out recently. It's the one we're celebrating its birthday, and it's sort of the month that we're aware of banned books. And I'll drop a lot of resources in the show notes for folks if you want to learn more about what you can do. But let's talk about a beautiful little book of yours that came out this summer that maybe didn't get quite the book birthday she deserved since everybody was on summer vacation.
It's true. Um,
So you had a book come out called Prunella, and I thought that was just such a gorgeous book for being your own self, for not being afraid to be different, and for building relationships. So talk a little bit about Prunella.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so Prunella came to me because I got a seed catalog in the mail, one of those garden catalogs. And on the back, there was a plant called Prunella, and it's funny now because now that I know more, I think Prunella was a character on the Arthur series, but I didn't remember that. But I saw that it's a purple flower, and I think it's like an herb that was used in medicines. And I thought, what a good name! What a good name! And I have a plant in my backyard. That doesn't smell nice and attracts all the flies. And I thought, it's so interesting. Like the plant is so strange looking and it's purple and long. And it made me think like, oh, I wonder if Prunella would like a weird plant like that. And so what I love so much about writing picture books that I'm writing fiction, but I do so much research when no matter what, I mean, the War for Reading, I did a lot of research into book banning and what's happening and how the numbers are climbing. But for Prunella, I learned all about, poisonous plants and carnivorous plants and how plants protect themselves, which you really think about. Like when you think about a rose and the thorns, you're just thinking inconvenient. You're not thinking, oh, it's protecting itself. Of course.
Right.
So she basically just is born with a purple thumb, and her parents have green thumbs, and they're kind of like, what does this mean? And they discover that she likes all these strange things. So they help her plant her strange garden, which doesn't endear her to any of the schoolyard friends or the neighborhood friends. And so she kind of just feels alone, and she goes to school and she's alone. And then one day someone else asks her a question about their Venus flytrap. And she's like, oh, could someone else? And it's kind of the same thing. Like you kind of think you're alone. You think you're alone until all of a sudden you realize, oh, there are other people just like me. And so she discovers this whole tribe of people that like bugs and that like other plants. And she comes out of her shell and she, finds her, what do they call it? You find your crew, you find your team.
Right.
Yeah, and so it's kind, of course it ends happy and she's happy and she doesn't have to sacrifice what she loves, which I think is the most important part.
And that's one of, I think, the best lessons we can give our kids is that it's okay to be an individual and to love the things that you love,
Right.
whether they seem strange to somebody else or not.
Right. And I think too, when you grow up, I mean, maybe not so much now with social media and there's so much, interconnectivity, but when you grow up eating the food that you eat, and you just think, oh, this is the food that people eat. You kind of extrapolate out without any
Yeah.
knowledge that the world is not just like your house. And and I think that's when another thing books do, it lets you know at a younger age that there's lots of different homes and houses and foods and experiences and traditions that because you really do when you're little,
Right.
you just think everyone's doing what you're doing, and it's not true.
Well, and that's another power of books because you just mentioned social media, and honestly, the algorithm is a bubble chamber. It's like an echo chamber. It's literally giving you people like you or things like you, and so it's reinforcing that bias. And so when you've got a book and you've got exposure to things that might be different, you're actually maybe getting that first step into looking for the beauty and difference.
Right. And you don't have to do it. You don't have to, not celebrate Christmas or not eat pizza, but I don't know. I love the idea that it's a big world, because I think sometimes you live in a small world when you're small and it's such a big world. And it's nice to know that, early on, if possible.
So, as you were doing your research for Prunella, did you find a favorite creepy plant or insect?
It's funny. I bought myself a Venus flytrap
Can you
because
keep it alive?
I've been keeping it alive, but now, I take it outside, I take it inside. Like I will see flies like around it, but never going in it. And I'm thinking like, so now sometimes when there's a fly in the house, I try to like wound it. Imagine I'm trying to wound a tiny fly so I can feed it to my Venus flytrap. But I'm truly enjoying the whole experience of like the Venus flytrap. But I did learn, I had one as a kid, but you have to do certain things that I wasn't doing. So now I know more. And I've kept it alive now for like 4 months. So I'm so excited.
That's impressive. And you're
Because
not feeding it with your own blood. We don't have to worry about Little Shop of Horrors.
no. I know. Again, even that, the imagination of that is so awesome. Like people's imaginations, I don't know. I'm blown away all the time by people's imaginations.
Absolutely. So you've got Prunella out, you've got Roar for Reading out. What other magic can we expect from Beth Ferry in the next year or so?
So yeah, in October, I have a book coming out called A Moving Story, which I can go get. Should I go get it?
Go get it. I'll pause it right now.
Okay. So it's called A Moving Story, and I wrote it with my Stick and Stone illustrator, Tom Lichtenheld, and it's illustrated by Tom Booth. And look at that little panda bear. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, look at those eyes.
So cute. So it's a story about about moving. And Tom Lichtenheld had moved a few years ago. And he told me this story about the moving truck driving away, and he's watching it drive away with all his stuff. And suddenly it stops, and the mover gets out of the truck and he moves something out of the street. Then he gets back in the car and leaves. So Tom goes out to see what he moves, and he can see it was a little worm. And he was like, did that guy just stop to not run over a worm? And right, it just seemed so like, who would do that? But the whole, the idea of this big burly man like caring about a worm. And so he was telling me the story. He's like, oh, I think there's a book idea here. And so we wrote it together, which was super fun. And then, yeah, so it's just about taking care of it. Nothing's too small to treat right, to treat nicely. And so it's just a book about taking care of the things that you have and even the things that aren't yours. So it's sweet and it's fun.
That feels like that might be a theme in your writing lately, taking care of things no matter whether they're big or
Yeah,
small.
yeah. I think themes are so interesting because when you're, sitting down with your story and you're writing it, you're not really thinking about you're not you're worried,
Right.
you're not even thinking about the other books you've written. You're kind of worried about that one. So it's interesting when you kind of look at the books that I've written. I'm kind of like, oh, I really like pets and I really like friendships and I really like the things that I write a lot about without meaning to, really, not specifically.
Well, and that would make me think that those are part of what moves you as a human being, because we write about the things that we're passionate about. And
Right.
so I would guess if I were to say something about Beth Ferry, that you are somebody who's very engaged in your world and that you really care about making a difference.
Yeah, that's super nice. And yeah, I hope, I think that, you write for children because you want my biggest goal is that they read one of my books and then want to read another book, not even mine, just want to read. Because you hear so many times that kids aren't readers, and I think, oh my God, they're missing out. Like, they're missing out. Like, you just don't want them to miss out because you do age out of certain things, and you don't want them to, like, you want to be like, don't read this now, like, and then read it again, and you'll get a whole different experience when you're older. And so I hope that my books make kids want to read other books.
Well, and you're right about you want them to engage when they're older. I think I was telling you earlier, I'm teaching this first year seminar at Shenandoah this semester, and we're talking about bringing picture books to life. So these are 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. And for many of them, it's been a long time since they've held a picture book in their hands. And for some of them, I'm realizing they may never have truly held a picture book in their hands. And so
Are they loving it?
I put out books like we're talking about windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And every class, there's like an array of books from the shelves behind me that they're reading and examining. And so I was watching class on Tuesday and just smiling because they're sitting there reading aloud to each other and talking about the books. And oh my gosh, that looks like me. And my TA Riley looks at me and goes, "This has to be the most wholesome class on campus."
I bet. Oh my God. I know. It's like getting to be a kid. It's like going to class and getting to be a kid again. And
And
yet also discovering that some of the themes are big.
exactly, that it's so much deeper even than you first realized when you were exposed to the book in preschool or kindergarten or first grade. And I hope if we give any people anything to think about today, it's go to your library, pick out a picture book you've never seen before, and just sit on the floor and read it.
Because I think sometimes, like when I go to the bookstore with Tom Lichtenheld, we'll sometimes read the same book. And he is looking at the pictures first because he's an illustrator. And I am so looking at the pictures second. So it's like, because I always read, you have to read them more than once, in my opinion. And so when I'm reading it, I'm really reading it for the story first, because that's how I start. And then I look at the pictures. I mean, you're kind of doing it together, but
Yeah.
focusing on that. And I find it really interesting because, most of the time, obviously they go together, but it is like, you're getting two treats in one. You're really getting a story like that's told through the words, and then you're getting the story that's told through the pictures, which is so fun.
And I often encourage kids to try to read something 3 times. Read it once for the words,
Okay.
once for the pictures, and then once to see how they work together.
together, right?
Because sometimes the pictures extend and enhance in ways that the author may not have intended. And so
I
it's
think
really fun to see how that works together to create a full story.
it's so true because I love the books where the words, the pictures are telling the opposite of the words. I
Yes.
think so. And that to me, when I'm writing, I'm always like, I know that it's going to be illustrated, but still I feel like I have to tell a story that can be read, like stand alone, be like a full story alone. But one of my goals is to write a story where the pictures tell a totally different story because those books are brilliant and I enjoy
And
reading.
so much fun.
So much fun.
Well, Beth, thank you so much for joining us on the Adventures in Learning podcast.
Thank
Happy
you.
book birthday to Roy
Thank
for reading and
you.
Prunella, and we can't wait to see the
Thank
moving story.
you. Thank you. Thanks, Diane. Thanks for having me.